In this video I want to show you how to create a paper mapping using a projector and Resolume Arena. Now before we get into it, let's have a look at what we're going to create. I recently got inspired by Kirigami, a subcategory of origami where you use a single sheet of paper, cut it up, and then create these foldable 3D pop-out cards. I found this super fascinating, and there's some amazing artists who do incredible work with this. For example, Peter Dahmen or Ulagami, and I'll mention those in the description because they also have some print templates available and some tutorials on their channels. Once I made my first Kirigami, I mapped it in Resolume and created some techniques in Resolume where you don't even have to leave Resolume to create some really cool content. And I want to show you these and then also show you some techniques where we take it into Cinema 4D and recreate the whole structure in 3D to create some actual 3D mapping content. So what exactly do you need to recreate this? First of all, you need a Kirigami print template. And you can use any of the available online templates. Now, if you do want to follow what I'm doing exactly, I did create a complete template kit that is available on my web store. And with this, you get a printing template, the Resolume file with the input mapping, as well as all the project files and renderings that we create in this video, and also some extra loops for the setup. The link for this is in the description. For the Kirigami, you want to use some stronger paper that has some good structure, but also folds well. I'm using 200 grams, something around that strength is probably ideal. And then you will also need some kind of paper knife, like a scalpel, a cutting mat like this one to cut on, and a ruler. And then you will also want to use a ballpoint pen to mark the folding lines. The printing template you're going to print onto a regular piece of paper, which you are going to glue onto the thicker piece. And that way you don't have the template on the final artwork. And what you're going to do then is use the ballpoint pen to outline all of the folding lines. So you have the structure in the thicker paper to have an easy fold. And then what you also want to do is to cut through all of the cutting seams. Be sure to press hard enough so you cut through both sheets of paper. And at the end, once you're finished with that, you can take off the printing template again. Now the next part is the most tricky but also most exciting part. It's where the whole 3D structure comes together. So you want to follow the template of the PDF and just fold all of the mountain folds and the valley folds as they are marked in the template. You want to go slow here because this is a very fragile process and you don't want to create any folds where they are not supposed to be. Once you're finished, it should look something like this. And now we're ready to map this thing. If you like this type of content, consider subscribing and turning on the notifications because that helps me make more of these videos. Now let's get into it. Now before we get into Resolume, here's just a quick overview of my setup in general. So I have my little projector right here. You can use any projector that you want. It doesn't have to be that small. It can be a regular projector, obviously. I'm just using this one because it's quite practical to use in this kind of table setup. And here I have my structure that I fixed with some tape so it doesn't move. And you want to make sure that the projector almost has like 45 degrees angle just to reach as much as possible from our structure without having too much distortion. The projector is connected to the HDMI of the computer. And then you want to select it as an external monitor. So make sure that in your settings, in the display settings, this is actually an extended display and not set to anything like mirror or main or something like that. So for me, it's full HD resolution and that's all good. So I can close that. And just to get started, I just want to create a test grid just to align the projector physically. And for that, I'm going to go to the output and set the display 2 to my full screen output like that. And then I can also show my test card. You can also press Command-Shift-L to hide and show the test card. And so now I have my Resolume test grid up here. So what you want to do now is align your projector as closely as possible to the center and to be as straight as possible onto the whole structure and also just to fill out the entire shape. Because the thing is, the better the alignment is before you start mapping, the easier it's going to be, and also the less pixel shifting you're going to have. So you're just going to have a better quality of the mapping. So yeah, this is kind of the hardware setup, and now let's jump inside to Resolume. So I just started with a fresh composition, so you should pretty much have the same thing as I have now when you open up a new project. What we have is this full HD composition, and we can go in here into the output settings, into the advanced output, and this is where all of the mapping happens. To quickly explain mapping in Resolume, I'm just going to cover some of the basics. If you know Resolume already, you can skip this part, and I have made chapter markers. But if you're completely new, then here's some core concepts that are really important. Now, what we have to the left here is a screen. So you can project not only onto one screen, but onto multiple screens. So we could create like multiple screens for multiple projector, as many as your notebook or computer can take, basically. In this case, we only have one screen, and inside of the screen we have slices. So what a slice is, you select a certain part of the image inside of your input selection. So up here you have your input selection, and this input can be anything. Right now it's just the entire image as one single slice. And then you go to the output transformation, and this is where you actually transform it to your projector view. So you can see when I start moving my output right here, that in the output it is changing the scaling of this image. So the cool thing in Resolume is that I can have multiple slices. For instance, I can create a slice of just the left half of my image, and I can see that inside of my output transformation, because it's still selected for the full size image, it is now warping the image. But if I now change this back to also be the left half of the image, we are back to the original scaling. And so this way you can select which part of the image you want to project where on your output. And you can create some very complex mappings here, which is actually what we're going to do because we have a lot of slices that we have to cover. So for every one of our surfaces on the mapping structure, we are going to create one slice that we're going to create an input and an output for. And your input is what you're going to work with in other programs like Blender and Cinema 4D. So you want to think of a smart way to lay out your object in the input mapping, so we can create some content, and then we'll import it into Resolume, and the mapping is going to take care that all of our parts of the object are going to be projected correctly onto the output. Now I know a lot of this might sound confusing right now, but it's all going to make sense. Now if you work with your own Kirigami template that you found online, then you want to think of a way to create an input map that makes sense. So for that, I would recommend taking it into Photoshop, where I created a full HD composition, so 1920 by 1080 with 300 pixels per inch. Now you want to import your PDF or whatever printing template you have in here, and probably you want to scale it to match the height exactly. So once you aligned the height, you can also crop the image left and right because we have a lot of space here that we're not using. Now, once you have this, you can check the new image size that you have here under the image size, and the height obviously stayed the same, but the width is a new width, and this is what you want to use inside of Resolume as your composition width. We can save this, but in fact, I already did all of this, and if you got my template, then I have a template that is perfectly aligned to the grid that is working with some nice pixel perfect values, because I have 10 squares down, it's 1080 pixels, and then I have a width of 684 pixels, just because of how all of this adds up. And this can make our life inside of Resolume and also in the content creation tools like Cinema 4D and Blender easier, just because we know the exact measurements of all of this. Now we're gonna head back into Resolume and I'm gonna change my composition size to the size of my template. So it's 684 by 1080. And I'm just gonna name this Kirigami mapping. Now when you head back into the advanced output under output advanced, you can see that we still have the slice here that has full HD resolution. We don't need this anymore. What we are going to keep is just one slice of our entire image as reference. So I'm just going to right click this and set this to whole area. And this way it's going to fit into our whole area. And we're going to use this later to export for Blender. So I'm just going to call this full and disable it for now because we don't need this. What we are going to need are new slices that represent our input map. So first let me just import the input map as a reference, and I can do that by selecting our screen. And on the right side here we have our input guide. So if I click this and I go to the input map right here, I can load this in. Now I can actually disable the test card with Control-Shift-L or Command-Shift-L. And now you can see that we have our input map right here that is perfectly aligned with our composition. And because I know the exact size of my slices, I can now create some slices and type in the pixels instead of just guessing. But both is fine. So again, if you have your own template, you can just do it by eye. I just like to work mathematically correct and pixel perfect. So I'll create a new slice here. And then I will change the width and the height to 108. And just place this right here. And that looks quite good. And then I can duplicate this with Command D. Place it here, duplicate it again, and place it right here. And this also looks good. And now you can see that we're running into a problem right here because my slices right here, they're basically only rectangles, but we have more edges here. What you have in Resolume are so-called polygons, and you can add those right here. And this way you can create slices basically that have more than 4 edges, because a slice can always only be a rectangle and a polygon can have more edges. So I'm just gonna roughly align this. I'm not worrying about the exact measurements for now because I'm gonna type in all of those points manually. Because I know that the X position and the Y position of this point is exactly 108. And the one for this point is exactly 108 for the height. And then I have 108 plus 36 pixels because I know that this length is 36. So I can just type that in. You can calculate inside of Resolume. So I can just type 108 plus 36. And this way I can just perfectly align all of my points to get this pixel perfect grid. This is 108 times 2. This is basically this one. So I'll just take this 144 plus 36, and the Y is the same as this one. So I can just paste this onto all of these points. Again, you don't have to do it pixel perfect, but I just really enjoy knowing that all of this is perfectly aligned. And once we have this once, we can just duplicate it for all of the other ones. I'm just gonna create a second one for the one that's upside down, because taking this, duplicating it, and rotating it would affect some of the effects that we will apply later in Resolume. So I'm just gonna create this one by hand, and then we basically can duplicate the rest of them. So I'm just gonna create a second polygon, create the point here. And just a note, if you check this snapping tool right here, then all of these points will perfectly snap to your grid. So that way you don't have to worry about any imperfections, because once you just drag this, you can see that it snaps. This also snaps right in, this one snaps right in, because we already have the points. And so here I just have to drag this here, 326, 324, 216. I know that these values are correct, 216, that's all good. Then 252, I'll just type that in quickly. And this one will also snap. So now we have our polygons. Also try to keep some order here. I'm just gonna rearrange those so I keep this clean. And now I can go to my first polygon here, duplicate this and drag it here. Take my second one, duplicate it and drag it here. You can duplicate with Command or Control D. So now for this one, I can just place that here, then go back to Edit Points, select my 2 points up here, and then drag them up. So that one snapped in, and I think this one, yeah, is also looking good, so that's fine. And it always creates them on top of each other when you duplicate them, so I guess you kind of have to rearrange this manually, which is a little bit of a pain, but it's worth it to keep this in order here. There will be a point where we will have to check the arrangement of these, because if you have some objects in the real world that are in front of other ones, we'll have to check that the alignment is correct. And we'll get to that once we start with the output mapping. All right, so I now finished my input map with 32 polygons and 6 slices, so 38 slices basically in total. And the cool thing about this is now that any content that you create that fits into these will actually fit our mapping. And now it's all about matching these shapes onto our actual. Now it's all about getting all of these slices onto our actual surface. And we do that in the output mapping. And so if we go into the output mapping, you can see that I have my polygons all aligned here. And then something weird is going on with like the slices, because they're still full screen. And yeah, so what's going on here? What you want to do first is just select all of the slices and polygons, and then right click and set it to match the input shape. And so now we have it perfectly aligned the same way as it is in the input. And let's just center this, and that's going to be our starting point for mapping this. And if you get my template, then all of this input mapping will already be ready, and the output mapping will be at this state, because from here you have to map it to the specific position of your projector. So now just to show something on my slices, I'll just show the test card again. And if I now have a look at my output, I can see that this is still totally off. So we're gonna just take it slice by slice and align all of this to our output. So I'm just gonna disable all of the slices except the first one for now. So just Shift select them all, and then I can hide them by clicking this icon here. And so now only the first slice is visible. Now you can switch between the transform mode, where you just transform the whole thing, and the edit points mode, where you can actually edit the individual points up here. I'm gonna go back into the transform mode. Now it's about just watching my output and aligning this to my output shape. So at first I'm just gonna use the transform tool just to roughly align it. And then I'm gonna use the edit points to select the individual points and fine tune the actual points. And you can use the arrow keys for this, which makes this a whole lot more convenient. And so yeah, this is now the very time-consuming process of all of this, where you actually select every single one of those slices, go through them, match them to the output shape, and select the next one. But yeah, that's basically mapping. This might seem like a very old school technique, because in programs like Touch Designer, you can do actual 3D mapping, where you just import the object as a whole, select a couple of points, and then it automatically aligns them. But by doing it this way, we also get some nice advantages inside of Resolume, where we can use the individual slices with things like slice delay, slice transform, which we're going to have a look at later. So all of this hard work will eventually pay off in the end. It's also a very kind of like meditative process. For the rest of the mapping, I'm just going to skip through until I actually come to some points where it becomes interesting again to explain something. But for now, it's all about selecting the individual points and mapping them to the surface. Now that we get to the second row, I actually start mapping my first polygon. And here we also have our first overlap, and you can see that now it could get quite messy when we just leave all of this on. So either you turn off the slices from before. What you can also do is save and close this for now and put in a solid white. So I'm just gonna create a solid color, drag that into my composition here, make this white, and disable my test card. And this is just a bit more of a clean output to work with. So what you also have in the advanced output in Resolume here is this show slice grid option. You also have to show that in output. And this way you can actually see your points and your mouse in the output, which can also be quite handy. So another thing, if you have the Tracer plugin, you can also use this for mapping. I'll just go inside of my Tracer here. If you don't know, Tracer is a great plugin for Resolume, where you can import all of your slices and then make some traces where just single ones of them light up, or you can also transform your content onto all of the individual slices. Super powerful. I'm just going to disable my full slice right there to see my other ones. I'm just going to go into the factory right here and then click to vertical. And this is going to create a vertical chase of all of my slices. This can be useful to identify the individual slices and make the mapping a bit easier. So I'm just going to head back to Resolume. I have this solid here, and I'm going to apply the chaser effect onto this. And so now I can swipe through all of my steps. And for this, obviously, I have to activate all of my slices again. So this is just basically kind of an alternative technique to this. And I can save and close this. And now I can scroll through all of my steps to align my individual slices. So this is kind of another option to go about it. You can also map this to your MIDI controller, so that's quite nice. That way you can just scroll through quite quickly. Anyway, I'm just going to continue my mapping process right here and go through all of these step by step. And so the way I actually prefer to do it is I have one solid that is white without anything, and then one red one for the chaser. And so this way I can see all of the slices below. But with this one, I can actually control the, why can't I see it? Oh yeah, because it wasn't fully turned on. And so that way I have a full white solid that just highlights all my slices that I have currently activated. And then I can still scroll through the ones that I'm currently mapping as a red slice. And so one thing you can see here is that we have this overlap because of the cubes that are in front are kind of throwing a shadow onto the back here. And so I'm just gonna kind of work around. Like we could do two things. We could either put a mask in between, so we actually have no overlap. But for now, I'm just gonna make this a bit smaller, just so it doesn't intersect with the front. So here you can really see that the effect is quite strong. So I really have this overlap here if the perspective is correct. And I could move this here, but that would really warp the output. So I am actually going to put a mask in between here. So I am going to create a new mask, invert this, set it to transform, scale it down, and just mask out this little part right here, just so we have none of this on the front cube. And yeah, and here the order really matters. So now you can see that when I create this new polygon, it's actually behind. So I will need to put this in front of both the mask and this polygon 8 right here. Alrighty, so now we are finished with the output mapping, and you can see that all of my slices here are aligned. It's not completely perfect, but it's enough for a tutorial's sake. So let's keep it like that. And now let's have a look at what we can do with this inside of Resolume. So first of all, I'm just gonna disable my clips here, and I'm gonna load in a lines generator. So just look for the lines in the sources, and now activate this, and we can start animating the position by clicking on the symbol next to position and go to timeline. And now we can already see that our mapping is working. It's all nicely aligned. And the fun starts when we start applying some slice specific effects. For example, there is a slice transform inside of the effect. I can drag this onto my clip, and now I need to drop my slices in here. So to show my slices, I can go into the view right here and then show slices down here. And this way I have a new slice window popping up here, and now I can see my slices. And I can select some of those and drag them into here. Now I can see that my content is now playing only on those slices. And you can do the same. I can just delete this quickly. You can do exactly the same thing by directly just dragging the slices onto a specific clip. And so this way you can do some specific content that is only playing on specific slices. So I could add a second lines generator. I'll just alt drag that onto my second layer. Delete the slice transform here, select some other slices, drag them onto this. And now if I change something in here, like the width or the rotation, you can see that I have some different effects or some different content playing on those slices right now. And yeah, so you can create some very complex looking setups and some very kind of also organic stuff. You know, this is kind of what makes mapping, is that you really take the individual parts into consideration and you consider them in your content or play with the surface as such. That's kind of the point of mapping. Okay, now I'm gonna just click and option drag the lines onto a new column. Disable the other two ones. You can disable any click by just clicking into an empty panel on the same layer. So I have my lines right here. I'm just going to delete the slice transform. Another fun effect is the slice delay. So I can drag this onto my clip. And same principle, I can drop my slices in here. So I'll just select all of my slices, drop them in here. And now you can see that if I change any of the values, you can see that this scrubs through all of my slices and has this delay on the individual slices. So if I do this on something more concrete, like maybe a webcam input, so I'll go into the sources and just select my FaceTime camera. And so now you can see my face on this mapping. I'll do the same thing, or actually I'm just going to copy the effect from here. So I'm just going to alt drag that effect onto my clip. And this way I have my effect on here. And I can change the transform mode for this. So I can set it, now it's set to fill. You can set it to fit or stretch or none. And I'll probably stick with none for now. And just play with the size a bit. So something like this is probably fun. And yeah, so now you can see that you can create some interesting effects. Maybe I'll add an edge to that. This. So yeah, the slice delay can be a lot of fun and creates some very quick organic motion. So so this is the slice delay. And what's also fun is if I mix this with the colorize. So I'll go back to my lines and I'll add a colorize effect to my lines. And now if I change the strength, the opacity of my colorize, oh, actually I have to put it before my slice delay. So the order of the effects obviously matters very much, because now this is happening before the delay and my colorize that way is also delayed. So I can fade in my colorization effect, and depending on the speed, it either creates this kind of smooth gradient or a very stroby pattern of color. And it's also fun to play with the color itself switching. So I can change to this hue saturation brightness mode right here. And when I start animating the hue, we create a very trippy rainbow effect. So I could also start animating this here with timeline. And yeah, rainbow party. So here you can change the order of how the slices are delayed. And when it's set to original, it's just taking the order as they are imported right here. But you can also order it by size or width or height, which makes it a bit more random in our case. So let me just stop this just to see this a bit more. You can see that now it's more random than before. We can also sort it by X, which I'm not quite sure what this does actually, but it also creates an interesting pattern. So these are some fun effects to play around with directly inside of Resolume. And now any content that you play back, either the sources in Resolume, but also some content that you load in, you can transform with these slice delays. So let me just import my solids pack that you can also get on my web store. And these are just these super simple black and white shapes. Now if I add this slice delay to, well, I'll actually add it to the whole layer, just so we can skip through all of this quickly. And I'm gonna change the scaling to fill. Now you can see that these geometric patterns create some very interesting effects. And in this whole pack, I always only used rectangles with 90-degree angles. So everything kind of fits perfectly onto these kind of geometrical mappings. And stuff like this comes across very nicely. Now there is also a plugin in the juice bar, which is the plugin store for Resolume, and it's called the Slice Tracer. And if you drag this in as a source into an empty panel, you can deselect this merge shapes, and you can set an offset here, and this will animate the outlines of your slices. So I can, go here again, timeline, animate this. I can change the width. I can also start mirroring this stuff on specific axes, like y-axis, x-axis. I can set round corners. Quite some fun stuff right here. And coming back to the tracer, if you have the tracer plugin, obviously this is also a very neat plugin to play with when creating some stuff for complex mappings like this, because you have all of the slices and you can create your own sequences. So I'm just going to go into another sequence right here. Sequence, how does this work? Sequence 2. And so, for instance, I can just select the center one at first, and then I'm gonna do the outer ones like this. Actually, without this one. And then a third one with just the very outside ones, which includes these right here. This one, and like this. And I'm just gonna have this chase be 3 parts long. And so now you can see that we have this chase created. It's our sequence 2. I can go back into Resolume, pick a solid color here, and then go into the effects, look for the chaser, drag that in, go to my sequence 2, and then start animating my sequence. And you can also always make this BPM reactive, so this can go to the beat. If I tap this in, and then you can create some. And you can also create some echoes for this. So it will always have this kind of delay. And here you just have like endless variations of playing around with this pattern, creating some up and down, left, right, spirals, all sorts of stuff. So the chaser is definitely also a very powerful plugin for this kind of setup. So the new version of Chaser also comes with the so-called wiper. So you can go into the effects panel, search for wiper, drag this onto a solid. And what this allows you to do is to select one of your sequences and then create these wipes that are kind of these gradients that move along your slices. And this is quite neat because it also allows you for some very quick variations and interesting patterns along your object. And you have quite a lot of options here with creating loops and then flipping directions having them go in different directions. So you can have quite some fun in here. So these are some of the techniques on how you can use the built-in effects and sources in Resolume, and also use some of the plugins from JuiceBar and the Chaser. Now we can also have a look at how to create some 3D content for this in programs like Cinema 4D or Blender, and I have 2 separate videos about that, so you can click the links in the description for that, where we're going to have a look at how to create some of this content. So these are just different techniques on taking this whole mapping into the 3D space and then playing with the shapes to create some form of either play with like light and shadow, as with these, and then also creating some movement in different directions, wiping through with this kind of field MoGraph effects, and also some very basic but effective kind of pixel art stuff that matches the shape. I mean, even just that, if I add a delay RGB to that, already looks kind of interesting. So yeah, just these allow for a lot of variations and possibilities, and these are all included in my preset pack. Now I can also show you some specific effects that I think work quite well on these mapping clips like this one. For instance, there's the fisheye. If I drag this on here, this creates this kind of fisheye effect. And you don't want to use it like super strong like this, but if you just create this like very subtle pulsing. So if I animate this timeline here and set it to bounce, then take down the time, it now kind of creates this breathing sort of animation. And you could also, of course, always map this to the BPM. So it creates like a pulse to the beat and that kind of stuff. So I think this is a very effective technique. So now that we created our mapping in Resolume, we can take this into a 3D program and create some content there. So I created separate videos on how to do that in either Blender or in Cinema 4D. Please let me know in the comments which one of those programs you're using, because I'm using mainly Cinema, but I'm kind of relearning Blender now, just so I can also teach with a open source software. So a link of the videos in the description. But the cool thing about it is that once you created your input map, you can take that into any program of your choice and just work with it from there. So this really just depends on your own style and what you're comfortable with. I even took the template into Procreate and just did some drawings there, just drawing onto the map on separate layers and then doing like some kind of stop motion animation effects. So really like imagination is your limit here, and that's the beauty of projection mapping, because it's a very free medium and you can work with any kind of content creation method that you want to. So that's it for this video. For the next parts, click on the links. If you enjoyed, then leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content in general. And if you have any questions, then leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.
you.